Hi, I'm Nikolas Ovaskainen. I'm a research scientist working at Geological Survey of Finland, and I'm aiming to hold a lecture today on geological data, specifically critical raw material data, and where you can get it and how available it is in Europe. A bit more about my background. I have a doctoral degree in brittle structural geology, which means investigating faults and fractures in the bedrock. My main focus is on siting of, for example, nuclear waste repositories and nuclear installations and so on. However, this siting that I do, it's partly a cheese task, and consequently, I have also expertise in spatial data management and analysis, which I apply in the CIRAN project for analyzing overlap between protected areas and critical raw materials. First, a bit about what critical raw materials are and what is the situation in Europe related to them currently. The European Union has labeled specific commodities as critical for European industry, for example, for these green transition objectives. So we need certain materials to create green energy solutions such as wind, solar, and so on. The primary source for many of these commodities are mines, so holes in the bedrock where bedrock is excavated and materials extracted and refined. These done from mineral deposits, so you cannot do a mine anywhere. You need to find certain locations where these materials are concentrated, and it is economically feasible to mine them. Through mineral exploration and establishment of mines, locations of occurrences of critical raw materials have been mapped across Europe. Most of this mapping has been done by national geological surveys, at least in Nordic countries where I'm more of an expert. They have gathered data and they have put them in common databases within countries themselves. But different countries have different mining histories and different geological potential, so they might not have the materials that we are looking for. And consequently, countries differ in terms of how occurrences have been reported and how much extractions has happened in each country. Consequently, also mining must happen at specific locations because geology constraints where you can economically mine these certain materials. Horizon Europe, which is a research program of the European Union. Many projects there have done this work of integrating national inventories of occurrence data. For example, in this map on the right, you can see a map compiled into a PDF, so it is somewhat easily available and readable, of these hard rock deposits of Europe, which means the minerals are within the bedrock. So these are across many countries within Europe, trying to commonly report their locations, occurrences, and where potential new mining might happen in the future. Now I will show some data sources, so where you can get this critical raw material data, specifically in Europe and from European countries. But I will also mention one global platform. Previously I mentioned multiple Horizon Europe projects that have gathered data in the European Union. This European Geological Data Infrastructure, EGDI for short, is a platform created by these projects. It harvests, validates, and harmonizes data from all these different geological organizations, for example, surveys across EU member states, and also from non-EU countries to some extent. I have shown the link here in the presentation. Now there's this global proprietary platform S&P Capital IQ Pro. As far as I know and have used this, used by, for example, economists, for example, to estimate where minerals are being mined, how much of it is left, and so on, for economical purposes, for example. But because this is not an open platform, the origins of such data is not as clear as, for example, in the EGDI platform that I mentioned. And lastly, I want to mention that most nations, especially EU nations, they have their own platforms where they have the country-specific information on raw materials, including critical ones. And these are usually most accurate and most up-to-date, but it is difficult to compare data across national platforms because they are not yet harmonized. In this figure on the right, I show an example of a national platform from the Geological Survey of Finland, so from where I work, where there's deposits of Finland displayed on a map. Now for our purposes in CIRAN project, we found this EGDI platform to be the most relevant. It has been collected by previous Horizon Europe projects, which we are following, so it's a natural choice. Specifically, it contains ready-made layer, which I name here Critical Raw Material Occurrence Points 2023, which has a subset of data, and this ready-made product allows comparisons between countries. Furthermore, it contains harmonized attributes such as the commodity and size of the deposit, at least some estimate, and for some of the point data. I will come back to this later. Data uncertainties. A processed version has also been published as a PDF map of these critical raw material occurrences, which for regular users is more easily viewable. Similarly, web pages, such as one provided by this EGDI platform, provide the most easiest access for normal people to find these critical raw material occurrence data, for example, from their own countries or beyond. However, for deeper analysis, you will want to find platforms that support downloading the data, and then you can analyze it yourself using GIS programs on your own computer. Now a bit about data coverage and representativeness. So how good is the data that is available? And specifically, I will talk about the European data, and even more specifically about this mean for EU harmonized dataset, in which this critical raw material occurrence points 2023 selected data set is. As you can tell from the layer name, it contains point data, but as you can imagine, surface mineral occurrences, especially mines, often cover a spatial extent on the surface of the Earth. So they cover some area rather than being best represented by a single point. Consequently, at least for surface occurrences, polygon data would be more representative. The dataset contains CRM data from many EU and other European countries, but as of June 2024, when a last peek at this data was done by us, it's lacking full coverage. The data counts vary by country, and reporting of what is an occurrence probably depends on the country. So what does it mean for a mineral to be an occurrence? What does it mean for it to be a deposit? These exact definitions probably vary, which causes uncertainties in the data. However, this already covers most European countries, and many of the CRMs that are listed by the European Union are covered by this dataset. So the actual minerals that we are looking for are reported in this dataset, and there are possibilities to use this to compare countries, for example, where are the best possibilities for mining some of these materials. few things to mention. In this figure on the right, you can see that there are a few countries categorized as missing CRM data, for example Germany, the UK, at least part of it. These lack data in this specific data set, but in the future we expect that these countries will get their data added to this integrated data set. Hopefully work will continue to integrate it, as this is an important issue, and data from also these countries will be added to the full data set. Now, where are these CRMs according to the data set? On this figure on the left, I have displaying a heat map of CRM occurrences. So where there are the most darkest colors, there are the most occurrences of critical raw materials. For example, you can see a darker region in middle of Sweden or southern Sweden. And then otherwise you will see that they are scattered, especially in Spain, Portugal, France. But then you get to this figure on the right, which should show how large each deposit is. However, in this data set, these column values or attribute values in the data, they are quite lacking. So for the biggest number of points do not have this specified. There is still no information how large an occurrence is, and you can imagine that this important is quite critical when, for example, comparing occurrences counts between countries if you don't know how large each occurrence is or how specifically have they been reported. So there's much work still to be done in harmonizing data and harmonizing the reporting differences between different countries. Now previously we talked about spatial data of critical raw materials. So where are they located? Now to get a bit more in depth in how they are classified. Already nowadays commercial projects need to evaluate their critical raw material deposits through different templates. For Europe, for example, this PERC or similar are already in use. But for a more global perspective into resources, United Nations have defined this United Nations Framework Classification for Resources, UNFC for short. It's a schema where you can tell about your deposit different factors or need to tell different factors, and then they can be compared to each other. This will help data from different countries to be more comparable with each other. This UNFC classification has been made a pre-requirement for achieving this strategic project status under the Critical Raw Materials Act of the European Commission. Consequently, future raw material occurrence data can be expected to slowly get updated with UNFC data. So countries will slowly adapt this standard to, for example, meet the requirements of the Critical Raw Materials Act. Image on the right is an image of a cover of report where UNFC classification has been used in Finland to classify mineral resources. So some countries are a bit further ahead, some countries are adopting right now these classifications. And through, for example, this UNFC, comparing different countries and having a better idea of the spatial location of occurrences will develop. Now lastly, a few questions. So I have talked about a lot of factors, but based on this lecture, can you find answers to these questions yourself? Check the sources that I provided in the previous slide, for example. Now to give a better idea than given by this very short lecture, you should check these sources for more information regarding raw materials and critical raw materials. Most of these I have referred to in the lecture, So for example, I have a link to the ECDI platform. You can get more information about the SMP database and service. You can check the National Geological Survey of Finland data on mineral deposits and so on. There's also the PDF map that has been made of all critical raw material hard rock deposits of Europe. So it's a simple PDF which you can open on any computer and view the data there. And lastly, about this UNFC code work, you can check this report on how Finnish minerals have been classified according to the UNFC. This lecture has been made as part of the CIRAN project, and this is it. Thank you from my part.